Hey everyone, welcome to Handing the Shame Back, a channel dedicated to the many adult survivors here in New Zealand and across the world who have experienced some form of child sexual abuse. You are not alone. There are many of us out there, and this is one small attempt at trying to have a safe place for survivors to land, maybe get a few tips that may help them and feel less alone. As with all of my shows, I have a trigger warning, and the reason that is in place is so that if for any reason you feel triggered or traumatized, please do stop watching. Go to the show notes below and you'll be directed to some resource and support. I have a fabulous guest tonight. It's been a little while and we've finally managed to do it. So I'm bringing to you the wonderful Phillippa Corney. Now, she comes to us from the South Island in New Zealand. She's just out of Christchurch. She's an advocate. She's a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner. And of course, she's a survivor. So welcome to the show, Phillippa.
Hi.
Lovely to meet you.
Yeah.
What we do is we don't know where this will go, but we trust that it will be helpful and healing to our beautiful survivors watching. And so what tends to happen is we start at kind of the beginning, as little or as much as you're prepared to share with us about your experience of child sexual abuse. How old were you, Phillippa, when all of this began?
Um, I was a baby actually, would you
Mhm.
believe?
Yeah.
And that might be hard for others to comprehend, but other than survivors. But as we know, and I think it's already been stated a lot, that a body, a physical body, spiritual, emotional, and mental, um, and a physical body never forgets. So when I was deeply into my healing process, I remembered that, and that was by my grandfather, my father's father.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it kind of started from then. Yeah,
And were you in New Zealand at the time? Were you living in this country at the time?
yeah. I was. Yeah, yeah. I grew up in a little village outside of just north of Wellington. So my grandparents, they were living in Timaru at the time, and it was, I guess one of those visits from, yeah, from there. So I was in Wellington till I was about just turning 6, and then we moved to Whangarei for a year, and then came to Christchurch. Yeah.
And this began with your grandfather. Did this continue with him?
It did at certain times, more so when we came to live in Christchurch. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And such a difficult position uh, for you and our survivors watching when it's a parent of your parent,
Mm,
because the parent is then in a position where what do they believe? And unfortunately, we know that these predators and pedophiles are so proficient, lots of P words here, I hope you're impressed,
yeah,
are
yeah,
so proficient at grooming not just
yes.
us, but our parents or caregivers, that
Mm,
they tend to get away with it. So what was the situation in your
mm.
family, Phillippa, in regards
Um,
to
well,
this?
yeah, from then on, knowing what I know now, my father was groomed by my grandfather to be a perpetrator as well. They belong to a satanic ritual abuse cult, so it was within my family from those roots. So yeah, my father really didn't have a chance, as I see it now, to not be a perpetrator. So he kind of carried on from then on. But also my mother was involved, and I can see now also that she was very much under the power and control of that hierarchy within the satanic ritual abuse cult. So yeah, so my mother, about 3 years old, took me to the men that my grandfather was kind of, I guess, in cahoots with, within that pedophile ring or satanic ritual abuse ring or network. So yeah, so it just started from there, really.
So at 3 years of age, your mother took you to him.
To
And
to particular men that were in the village that belonged to the network. Yeah, as I understand, now. Yeah.
so that would have been a very frightening time, I imagine.
Yeah, yeah, it was actually. Yeah, I remember I had a loving relationship with my mother up until that point, and but I had they were interested in me. Or the reason why my mother took me there was because I had a photographic memory. So I think she took me along to introduce me to them, so that, and the message from then on was, well, we will help you with that. And, I think that's why they were really interested in me, to exploit that part of me.
That
And use,
photographic memory and that ability to
yeah,
recall.
yes, yeah, yeah. And I had, as I know now, I had kind of telepathic, kind of psychic ability as well. So, of course, they wanted to exploit that as well. And yeah, the message was, as I said, that we will, don't tell anyone else about this. We will help you with this, and don't tell anyone at school. And this is just our little secret. And you know, yeah, we'll just train you up some more, and look after you from here on in. Yeah,
Oh, and those words, "Don't tell anyone, this is just our little secret," says every
yeah,
pedophile everywhere,
yeah,
you know.
exactly. It's all
Um,
part of the grooming. Yeah,
was there a name for this particular group? I know we've got groups across the world. Some are called,
yeah,
some of the Freemasons, some are others. I'm just wondering if your satanic ritual cult had a
yeah.
specific.
Um, the only name that I've been able to access or allow myself to remember, because of the huge amount of fear that I grew up with, is, if
Are you there, Phillippa? We seem to have lost Phillippa. I'm not sure what's going on there.
oh, there we
Oh,
go.
we lost you there for a minute,
Yeah,
just as you were about
temporarily
to
lost me.
say a name, which is interesting.
Interesting.
You were
Yeah.
going to give
Yeah.
us a name.
Um,
So, um,
yeah.
as you were, so the it's interesting is not the right word, but you know,
Mm.
through the generations, this happened. This continued.
Yes.
People were complicit. They were trained. There were expectations, I imagine.
Yeah.
Were your with the satanic ritual abuse?
Mm.
I imagine there were other children involved as well. So did you find that your family was required to spend time with other families who were also...
Yeah, 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 yeah. And initially in the village outside of Wellington, I was, oh well, I was going to say I was aware that it seemed like everybody in the village was into this, and I wasn't never sure about who was who. Or I mean, my parents were very social. Um, they kind of grew up in a very social kind of, they had a big social circle, which kind of is congruent with the satanic ritual abuse, that kind of elitism and that kind of dynamic. So yeah, I was aware that everybody was, could be in it. I never knew who I could trust, really. Yeah, you never really knew who was going to turn up at a ritual or not. Yeah.
Did
Mm.
you? Yeah, and I guess the thing is then, who can you trust? Because if you can't trust anyone, what do you then do or look for or hope
Yeah.
for? And I guess one of the things for me is that as a small child, just listening to you when you were a small child, I'm wondering if you couldn't really trust either parent because they were going
No.
to take you there or
Yeah.
potentially become engaged in it. Were you aware if money changed hands, or was it...
Definitely, I became aware of that. Like I was aware later on when we moved to Christchurch that my father was receiving money. Like I felt like my father was selling me. So, the message all the time financially for me, when I spoke about, being indoctrinated into it early on, the message was, we will always look after you. We will provide for you. You won't have to, if you comply, basically, you won't have to worry about a thing in your life. We will take care of you. So, that's a big carrot dangling. I didn't buy it, even at that very young age, but certainly I think my father was, that was a big draw card for him, because back in those days, I mean, I'm 65 now, so this was 60s, 70s, or 50s, late 50s, 60s, 70s. So, the social standing, it was very important to be, in that social standing. And my grandfather was certainly into that dynamic and that need of power and control. And yeah, that was, money was definitely exchanged. Further on, I guess more so when I was like 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. Yeah, yeah.
And I imagine the more he could make, the more he would be happy for you to be utilized in that way. So how
Yeah.
did you cope? What did you do? How were you able to manage or self-soothe or
Um,
find a way through?
yeah, I think from a very early age, from the time my grandfather sexually abused me when I was a baby, I was aware spiritually. I was aware, um, that wariness, that knowledge of, oh, this is not right, and that part of me, I think, was kind of destined to be there, and that just got stronger and stronger. I know I was a very defiant, um, child, and I screamed and shouted till my nose bled, actually, um, in the hope that someone would hear me and someone would rescue me. But course, that didn't happen. But yeah, so that part of me was very, very strong, like warrior type. And I think that, I've done a lot of past life regression in my healing. I've done a lot of tuning into myself at that level. So I'm very aware of that's helped me reconcile with why I'm in this life at all, and why I survived. So that has always been very strong. So I think I made a pact with myself very early on that I would only survive to protect my brother, because there was threats on his life all the time. And the other children, seeing what was happening to the other children, I just, again, that strong, defiant warrior within me just really wanted to survive, to tell on them. That was the main thing. So, um, yeah, so that's really, I think my main message in that is I don't I don't want to speak about sexual abuse or satanic ritual abuse for people to feel sorry for me, or for people. It's not other people's job to feel my pain and the pain of my survival. It's their job and responsibility in this life to go, oh my gosh, I've heard you. I need to get out on that street and help stop this happening to children. Those are the responses I think we need from other people in listening to, when people hear of survivors in this kind of dynamic at a really evil depth within our society. I think that's what I would like, and I think is necessary for people to respond in that way, like to go, okay, let me try and figure out a way to put myself out there to help stop this abuse on children.
Yeah, I think, and it's interesting you say that, and there's several things around that. And thank you, Phillippa. What a goal.
Yeah,
I'm going to take us back, if I may, because
yeah, yeah,
you've said a few things that I think our beautiful audience, hello, lovely ones, are going to relate to. So one is the threats on your brother's life.
yeah,
Now, as an older sibling, what you're talking about is not uncommon.
yeah,
We know for survivors that we're either, when we're being groomed, we're either being threatened or we're being bribed and
yeah,
manipulated. And as you said, underneath all of that is power and control, always, but
yeah,
always.
yeah,
So when you've got your beautiful younger brother, you'll do anything to keep him safe, which means you
yeah,
have to survive this, yeah?
yeah,
For
yeah,
our survivors watching, for a lot of them, this was a similar thing. And I think what happens is that we can end up then carrying that guilt, Phillippa, that I didn't do enough, or I could have done more, or what if? And I guess I'm just wondering, for you,
mm,
now you look back as an adult and you can see the logic of it all. What's your feeling about that? What would you say to our survivors who watch and maybe still carry that awful feeling of, oh my gosh, I couldn't keep my brother safe or my sister safe, or
yeah, yeah. Um, Actually, for me, it was my elder brother, one of my elder brothers, but he was my best friend, and we were like little buddies. We were only 16 months apart, so we were very close. But yeah, I did feel growing up that I was successful in protecting him, because I was pretty much a sitting duck when I put my hand up for that, but I think they were going to use me anyway. They
So, audience, just a couple of threads from that as we're waiting for Phillippa's internet to kick back in. As you will know, as survivors yourself, if you were being threatened about a sibling, it was going to happen to them anyway, unfortunately, as you now know as adults. But it's quite powerful and quite cruel, the type of bribery or manipulation that's used to make sure you're complicit, or we were complicit with the abuse actually happening. She's coming back. Hello, we've got you back.
hello. There
Yeah,
we go.
it was gonna happen to you anyway. I was just telling the
Yeah,
audience that it
yeah,
sounds like for every
yeah,
threat ever made from any pedophile ever, they were always going
yeah,
to do it to you anyway, and
yeah,
that was just
yeah,
to ensure that you were perhaps more malleable or less.
yeah, yeah. That's right. Well, you're more vulnerable when it's a person that you love,
Yeah,
you know, and that's what got me through was that love. Um, yeah. So I had it, even though there was horrific stuff going on, there was love in my family. Like my parents actually loved each other. So when the rituals weren't going on, I think that's what allowed me to get me through. There was a question before, what kind of soothed me, what helped me. Well, that was a strong thing that I've um, obviously recognized back then. But I still felt that betrayal by my parents. I didn't feel safe with them, but at times I kind of did. So that was the confusion, but that was part of the programming and all that sort of thing. So yeah, that survivor guilt is pretty a hard one to get to heal from, to get over, to heal from. Um, but I don't feel that survivor guilt anymore. I feel sadness and grief and empathy um, completely for other children, and especially children that were there alongside me. There's that grief is huge as well. It's epic. But I had to decide at a certain point that in my healing process that I couldn't protect my brother forever. I had to let that go. So I had a child uh, forced pregnancies within that group as well, and a lot of um, those pregnancies were aborted. And then I had a pregnancy which was full term, which I was allowed to. I was led to believe that that child I was going to be able to keep um, within the cult group, but as soon as I gave birth, that child was given away. So then the threats were, well, if you don't still comply, then you'll have to kill your own baby. So um, there was, so then I went into protection mode to keep that baby safe. So, but then at a certain stage, when my spirit was just about dying, I just got to a point in my life that I just couldn't handle it anymore. And I was learning to I learned a lot about their business dealings. They kind of groomed me for a particular role. So when it got to that point where I had a lot of information about them, I got to that point where I just thought I can't protect my child anymore. There are other children that need to be. I need to get out of this so I can use my voice and try and at some point, I didn't know how that was going to happen, but at some point in my life, I would find a way to to speak and to stop the silence. Yeah.
So, Phillippa, how old were you when your baby girl got taken off you?
Um, I to be honest, I don't know exactly because I was so traumatized during those years. Obviously, I was of an age where I could be pregnant,
Yes.
but I know that that was precipitated, or kind of, what's the word? That was intentionally, systematically, and on a physical level. That was, I was kind of used in a way that, they got me pregnant at specific times so that they could use that against me to make me more vulnerable and compliant and more grief stricken, and so therefore have more power and control over me to use that, against me, and to comply more. Yeah.
So
So
just that it was just a never-ending nightmare because
yeah,
we're becoming older and getting more, I guess, your cognition was developing as it does in children and
yeah,
adolescents. Uh,
yeah,
they could see potentially that there would be a part of you that would emerge quite strongly. But if you
yeah,
were pregnant, then you were able to be managed and controlled more easily. Is that how
yeah,
it felt?
yeah. So basically, the, they kind of knew your strengths and they knew your weaknesses. They systematically worked on that to the hilt. So the stronger you were, the more you got thrown at you, basically. Yeah, the more you suffered, pretty much. Yeah,
And I
because they
guess,
wanted to break your spirit.
yeah.
Yeah, which, is a common thing, isn't it? Yeah.
How on earth did you manage to break away? How did this end? You
Yeah.
Yeah, was
Um,
there a point in time for you or
yeah, there was. By this stage, I had been around the block a bit globally. um, I was trafficked overseas as well, so that taught me a whole lot about what they were up to, who they were aligning themselves with. Um, this was, I was sold to, as a bit of a trophy to, high profile elites in the world.
yeah,
So I learnt, like, this is the silly thing, isn't it? Like, they'll always shoot themselves in the foot eventually. Um, and this is the empowerment that survivors have. But, that's another thing that I would like to say is that, it's only a matter of time, and they do shoot themselves in the foot. They're so arrogant, with thinking that they can actually get away with this. I mean, they have got away with it, obviously, to a terrible state, and that's showing up in the world globally now. But I was able to learn a lot about their dealings, their business dealings, and of course who they were involved with. So um, that gave me the courage and the confidence to, I led them to believe all the time that I was one of them, but in my heart, I wasn't. Um, so I managed to fight for my sanity so much in and around that because of the programming. Um, I felt like I nearly lost myself self a couple of times, but I managed to reconnect with that spiritual part of myself, to keep myself safe again within myself. But so as time went on, I just made the pact with myself that I would learn as much about them as possible. And then it got to a certain time when I just had had enough. I just thought, and before I say that, there was one person I met overseas who was genuinely interested in me on a romantic level, and I felt for the first time in my life that someone could see me, saw the real me, and that person for me offered protection for me, but I said I can't stay here. This was in another country overseas, and I said I can't stay here. Um, I've got a son and a brother to, I couldn't leave them in New Zealand here on their own. So I came back, but that was quite profound in the fact that it gave me the confidence to know that someone else could see me and was willing to love me. And um, it was after that I let these particular men, just before a ritual was going to be happening, I let them know that no, I wasn't going to do that anymore. And the shock horror on their faces was absolutely priceless, because up until that stage they believed that I was one of them.
So any idea how old you would have been at this point?
Yeah, I think it was around 15,
Yeah.
16 years old. Yeah.
Well,
Um,
because just before you continue,
hmm,
thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. So
my pleasure. It's what I've lived for, to speak. Yeah.
well, the powerful thing, and for survivors watching, you know, all it took was one person, and for you beautiful ones out there watching, it's often we just need one
Yeah.
person sees us, who senses who we really are, who sees the light in us. And that's often all it takes for us to find the
Yeah.
courage um, to be true to ourselves. So
Yeah.
thank you, Phillippa, because I think that's quite a powerful point. And sometimes, as you know, for us as survivors, sometimes all we have is hope, and there can often not be anything else but that, and that can even be a
Yeah.
dim light at times. So really
Yeah.
appreciate what you're saying.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
so at 15 or 16, you said, "Look, I'm not doing that anymore," and they were shocked. And how did you manage to escape from ever having to attend those
Yeah.
rituals
Um,
or being trafficked?
yeah, I said it with such conviction, and I physically grabbed this guy by the scruff of the neck, this doctor, um, that I was kind of groomed to be his right hand uh,
Person?
young woman,
Yeah.
so to speak. So I um I've I knew in those moments that I had to assert myself, and I think they saw that strength and that warrior within me, and I really meant business. I said, if you touch my son, if you kill my son, I will speak. So I kind of made a pact with them on that, with in and around that dynamic, that I would keep my silence. I kind of tried to pull the wool over their eyes in a way, and I will keep my silence if you don't touch my son,
And
or my brother, I think I said at that point in time. And I'd had another experience prior to that as well, which was pretty horrific, and I knew in those moments I had a near death experience. My I was being cloned, and my DNA it felt like it was being sucked from me, and I I revealed, or the beings that were doing that to me, they could see who I truly was on a spiritual level. So that also gave me the strength to come back here and say what I did that day. And that, I think they knew that on some level, or they
They
could
would
they
have
could
felt
see
that.
that
Yeah.
within me as well. So I think they knew that they couldn't touch me, that they'd lost me, that their big experiment with me
Was
had
over.
faltered. It revealed a crack in their systematic programming, and I think they were just so horrified that they dropped me.
Thank
But
God.
they did after that, they punished me severely physically, and I nearly died because of that. I remember coming in and out of my body thinking, I'm not going to survive. But then my mother actually tended to me, and I finally saw an authentic love that she still had for me. And that's what allowed me to come back into my body. And yeah. And
Well,
so I think that they dropped my family because we were too risky.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, Phillippa, just mind blowing and just a full credit to you that you were able to even survive some of it, let alone what you did. The, you know, as we move through your life and for our wonderful survivor family who will be experiencing this moment, what has helped you with the healing and recovery? Because, we've got survivors who could really learn from you.
Yeah. 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 Um, well, nature has really helped me. I think when I was younger, nature really helped me survive. I also had a white light experience when I was 3 years old. Or 3 to 4 years old, I nearly died. And on a spiritual level, I went to that white light. So that reclaiming that memory when I was fully healing, it was about age 31-ish that I started, consciously healing, when the memories started surfacing. Um, so that really helped me throughout my healing process, like reclaiming that experience back with that near-death experience of going to that white light. It reminded me again of who I was. But my counselor was amazing. 35 years ago, probably more than that now, she knew about satanic ritual abuse. And she gave me time, you know, not just in our session, for me to be able to, connect with the horrific emotions and work through those, release them, and work through those. So that was, if I hadn't had Pat, I don't know where I would have been with it all. She was just amazing. I was with her for 20 years, week in
Wow.
and week out.
Wow.
Yep.
And
And I also had
that's what we
yeah,
need. Mm.
yeah, yeah, yeah. She was a very intelligent woman, kind, quiet. She was a role model of a mother that, I mean, I loved my mother, but despite everything, and I love my father despite everything. Children do. It's that unconditional loving bond that we have. And I respect and comprehend how that might not be for some other survivors. But yeah, she was a wonderful woman. Um,
And I
and then
guess because I think, apologies to interrupt you.
no, no, that's fine.
The You've raised a good point here. Look, for some of us as survivors, we didn't have any love from either parent. For some of us, we might have had love from one, but the point
Yeah,
being, it's not so much that well, in my opinion, I think as children, our parents are God to us because we can't survive without them. So
mm,
there's such a desperate need and dependency for a bigger person to care for us and feed us and nurture us and look
yeah,
after us. And of course,
yeah,
because of that dependency and that innate desire to survive,
yeah,
can't afford to turn those adults bad because
yeah,
we can't exist without them. So what we do, I think, is turn it in. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And you know, a lot of the times, well, for me anyway, I saw the good in the bad. Didn't like the bad, obviously, but I could see and sense that my parents were being controlled. You know, I could see that they were under that parent control anyway. So there was almost a kind of a camaraderie in my family. Apart from my father was obviously more abusive at home because he was trained to be. Um, but I did see the good in people. I think that was another thing that allowed me to survive. And I saw
Oh,
how horribly pathetic the men who needed gratifying. I saw their vulnerability. You know, as I grew up, I saw how they needed. I mean, they were crazy, evil, crazy people, but there were different degrees of that in the hierarchy within the group as well. So you kind of knew who were the real crazy ones, who were the kind of next level down, and then you know, um,
so
yeah,
those sort of interesting what you learned and observed and were able to intuit actually.
yeah,
You've talked about things in terms of healing back then around, nature was a big teacher,
yeah,
wonderful
yeah,
therapist, so that talking therapy became helpful. Your
yeah,
white light experience, so your
yeah,
spirituality, being able to reconnect with
mm,
that. As you've
yeah,
moved forward in your life, tell us about the kind of work that you do and the type of modalities you use now to help other people.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I think, luckily for me too, I got into floristry when I left school. I didn't. I mean, my acad my intelligence was very suppressed growing up, so I didn't do well at school. I just had to shut that part of myself down. So I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do when I leave school? You know, so my cousin was a florist, so I got into floristry. So that kind of helped me as far as nature. It was a beautiful thing to work with, and it got me out of my shell because I was forced to, because I was very quiet. I hardly said boo to anyone, you know, growing up in my teenage years, to the point where people would ask me, what's wrong, kind of thing. But of course, my lips were sealed, and because I didn't want to risk, um,
No.
you know, yeah, that whole 9 yards of that. So um, I didn't really feel safe until I met my first husband. But as I say, I was in floristry and I was getting more confidence with interacting with, I was becoming a bit more social and yeah, so that served me well. And because I was quite naturally artistic anyway, that really helped my confidence as well. Um, so, and of course, I loved art and you know, I was always taken these gorgeous homes, and I loved interior design and all that sort of thing. So, I mean, that was one of the things that I wanted to do when I left school, but I didn't want to go to Dunedin because that was an awful place to me because so much had happened in Dunedin. Um, so I didn't want to go there, so I had to let that go. Um, but I would still love to do that. But so I always had that artistic side in me innately. And then I was kind of a bit fed up with floristry. It's a very demanding job and quite physical, and I felt like there was always something more that I needed to do, you know, like intellectually. I'd never been able to use my brain how I wanted to use my brain. So I wanted to reclaim that part of myself back. So I'd had counselling, as I said, for 20 years, and then I got to the point where I could self-manage and self-heal myself. Um, and my counsellor, Pat, actually passed away, which was very sad. Um, and I tried another couple of counsellors, but they weren't really up to the task, especially with the satanic ritual abuse content. I didn't feel safe with them, um, emotionally as well, because they were a little bit inappropriate at times. Um, just in an emotional way, I just don't think they were very
Oh,
healthy people.
oh.
And that told me where I was at within my process. That allowed me to go, okay, I'm actually healthier than these other people, and they're in a counselling role. So I think that was a big learning curve, meant to be, I think. And then so then I had massage, which was of course so beautiful, safe touch, and that helped a lot. To feel that nurturing, soothing kind of therapy. And that brought up a lot of, unearthed a lot of stuck trauma on a physical, emotional, all aspects level of health, you know, holistic health. And then I heard about this acupuncturist, and I knew that there was more depth within me to be healed. So I went and had a session, and he gave me Reiki treatment on my third eye. And that was through that treatment that I was able to reconcile with past lives as well. And I learnt from that how well acupuncture worked for releasing post-trauma in a very manageable way. Yeah, in a
So,
very safe, manageable way. Yeah.
so you are now practicing this yourself. I noticed
Yes.
that you call it
Yeah.
traditional Japanese
Traditional Chinese medicine.
medicine. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
And
Yeah.
how do you find that? Is it in terms of, because obviously you'll have all sorts of people come to you, but some survivors as well. How do you find that as a methodology?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the Chinese medicine is based on the rhythms or the vibrations and
Yeah.
frequencies of the five elements. So our organs, internal organs, have a similar natural rhythm and frequency and vibration as that of the five elements in nature. So the elements are fire, earth, metal, water, and wood, and they all nourish each other. So
Yeah.
all the emotions are affected, um, or affect that sequential energy flow or chi flow. So and in the meridian system as well. So that's a great kind of model to share with people, you know, to allow them to understand what's going on with them physically with signs and symptoms, and what's going on with them emotionally, and especially for a survivor, because so many, as you know, it's the physical, horrific physical memories as well, and the pain and the grief, and and also with the anger and rage and how to manage that and how to, it's yeah, it's taught me a heck of a lot. My healing has taught me a lot, and
Yeah.
the depth, the ability to heal on a really deep level. It is very possible, and that's another great message I want to impart for other survivors, is that no matter what, we are so strong. We do have the ability to go through horrificness and come out the other side of it, and to never give up on yourself, and um, the strength and the ability to heal. All of our different parts that we've dissociated from because we had to. We're very creative beings, and the fact that we've been able to dissociate into our alters, and that's, of course, how we've survived the trauma. Yeah.
Well,
So,
it's so
mm,
so beautiful what you're saying. I've just been writing some notes here, and I think it's so interesting, and you've kind of alluded to it a couple of times, the fact that the body never forgets. It-
yeah,
Our
yeah,
minds may protect us from full memories because we are not ready to face, but the body will never forget what happened to it.
yeah,
And you'll
yeah,
notice that through instinctual responses or reflexes. But equally,
yeah,
I love what you're saying, and you said something earlier, as we're moving into closing out, Phillippa, and that was this, that partly I'm paraphrasing, but partly because of the conditioning and the power and control and the we received, for a lot of us as survivors, we can feel less than, not good enough, not have the confidence, not have our self-belief, not have a core belief other than we're
mm,
not good enough. And so I love what you're saying about never give up on yourself, because I think, as you said, we're very creative beings, and there's always a way through, and our innate ability to heal and always be moving towards healing is just so beautiful.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I just
yeah,
applaud all our wonderful survivors watching, because I know the battles that can go on, and I know that some of that self-talk can be reflective of the abuse and the abusers that we suffered. So, Phillippa,
yeah.
just as we're going into close, is there anything else you would like to bring up? Anything you perhaps didn't get to say, or something you'd like to add to?
Yeah. Whoopsie daisy. I've just sorry, I've lost my screen.
I can
Um,
still see you. We haven't lost
oh,
you.
can you? Okay, yeah. Um, yes, I think in the healing process, um, I think for every survivor, we need to stand up for ourselves and say, this is how much time I need. This is how I need to be supported. Because, that's the awful thing, that partners of survivors sometimes might not have the emotional um, evolvement to deal with what their partner's going through. I know it was very difficult for my partner because he was emotionally abused in his childhood, so it was very, very difficult for him to even want to uh, be with me while I was going through such painful memories, because he wasn't equipped to, at that stage. Not that he didn't want to be, he just wasn't equipped to deal with it or cope with it, even though I tried to, you know, encourage him to get support for himself. But it's usually because other people don't want to feel their own pain. Um, and that's why it's difficult for them to be with a survivor or be a friend to a survivor. But I think I want to let survivors know that, you know, you deserve support, you deserve to have safe communication in your relationships. And it's that safe communication that I promote in my holistic healing practice now. That's very paramount to any dialogue you have with anyone about holistic health issues, whether they're a survivor or not. So, but, I had to stand my ground. I had to believe in myself and reassure people around me that I know that I'm going to get through this. I know how much happened to me, so it is going to take a long time. And to just be okay with that, to have the confidence and
Yeah.
the assurance within yourself that you know you're going to get through it, but it's more about other people don't trust in the process as much as you might trust in your own process.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that's
yeah,
really important, and just a little additional. I think you'll like this, Phillippa. For those watching who maybe don't have the confidence or the lack of awareness yet, self-awareness around what you do need or how you would be best to heal, just journaling or writing it out so that over time it becomes clearer to you. Because
yeah,
sometimes with well-meaning friends or partners or family members, Philippa, I think you'd agree, there can be a disconnect because they're
yeah,
struggling with A, that even happened to you, and
yeah,
B, do we need to talk about it? Because I don't know what to do with it. So there's
yes,
often that unknowing or that lack of how best to support. Now,
yeah,
all the survivor feels or all we experience is, oh, here's yet another person who's in denial. And it's
yeah,
really hard then to find the confidence to say, this is how I feel. So I love what you said at the beginning, Philippa, which was that you're doing this work and you love this work because you're hoping that at least we can then get out there and people who hear these stories will want to take some action.
yeah.
I'm not seeing that happen too much because I think people struggle with the ugliness of it, and
I
therefore,
know.
yeah, therefore,
Yeah,
I don't want to do anything. I don't know what to do. I don't like what I'm hearing. There's a bit of that cognitive dissonance, and there's
yeah,
so that NIMBY, not in my backyard.
yeah. I know. And that's the difficult thing, isn't it? Like I really respect people's feelings, obviously, and it is about safe communication, and not blaming the other person for the way you are feeling about what you're hearing or seeing or sensing. So I guess the main message is, yeah, that it's not your job to feel traumatized by what you're hearing about what another survivor's gone through, but it is your responsibility to maybe not bury your head in the sand, and to know that you are strong enough to hear it because you're not actually the one that's gone through it. You're just hearing it.
Yeah, and I'm not even talking about survivors supporting survivors. I'm talking about partners or friends of survivors who may
Yeah,
not experience child sexual abuse. They struggle with
yeah,
the support. But look, it just
yeah,
as we're going into a close, Philippa, a final
yeah.
kind of statement from you or last thoughts
Um,
before we
yeah,
need to end.
yeah. Um, I guess in fearing, yeah, do not fear the pain of what someone else is going through, or don't fear your own pain of your own emotions, because you are strong enough to be with it and hear it. Yeah. And if you're not sure what to do about it, let's communicate about it. Let's it.
So Phillippa's frozen again, but I know she'll be back. She's doing great, isn't she? We're really lucky to have her with us tonight. And, you know, I still think about the one person who saw who she was, and I just want to give you that as a gift, guys, because I think that's really powerful. Just takes one person. But yeah, look, you know, as we are thinking about all of this, you must always prioritize you, because you need to be okay. You can't actually be there for anybody else. And I think we're gone. So look, thanks everybody for watching. I hope you got from this as much as I did. Thank you so much to Phillippa. And as always, I see you, I stand beside you, and I believe you.